I like the intro.
Hey guys, this is Brett Young, Taylor Young, and Rod Erb, and you're tuned in to the Be Extraordinary podcast with Erb and Young. Real conversations about business, leadership, and personal development. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Be Extraordinary podcast. We have a special guest with us today, and let me tell you something. If you are somebody that listens to this podcast, you probably like doing hard things, or you like the idea of doing hard things, and sometimes you say to yourself, man, I wonder what the next challenge could be. You're in for a treat this morning or this evening, this afternoon, whatever you're listening. The person that you're going to hear from today and the story that you're going to hear from today is one of the most exhilarating challenges that I've heard probably in the last couple years. And we sat down and we had breakfast, and he proceeded to tell me about this journey that he took. And I immediately, first of all, I was enthralled, and my mouth was, open, and I was like, holy moly, more people need to know about this, because there's just this incredible thing that happens when you embark on this personal development journey. And one of those things is pushing yourself. And what are the benefits of pushing yourself? Why push yourself? And then also, what happens if you push yourself and maybe you don't get all the way to the end? Or what are people going to think? And maybe I can't. Maybe it's a 100-mile bike race, or somebody's asked you to do a half marathon, or you want to do a marathon, and you think to yourself, I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe I'm not in shape enough. Maybe I'm not ready for that. And anybody that you talk to will end up telling you that they just did it and they started. And so sometimes we hear other people's stories and they inspire us to do these things. So before we start today, I just want to let you know, if you're thinking about doing something hard, I'm just going to encourage you, when you listen to this story today, to not only think, what would happen if you did this? And then what would keep you from doing this? And I would hope that after you're done listening to this today, you'd say, you know what? Maybe I don't have to go to this extreme, but what is the next challenge in my life that I'm going to conquer? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing here on this podcast, is to share stories that inspire, that give hope and give an inspiration for other people that want to do the same. So with that, we have Brooks Powell with us today. Brooks Powell is a good buddy of all three of ours. He has been a client for a long time. He is a community member here in the Central Florida area. And we've had the privilege of watching his entrepreneurial journey over the last couple of years. He had a very successful career in the HVAC contracting business, did very, very well for himself and his family, and he climbed that ladder and decided that it was time for him to go out on his own. And we have collaborated on many, many occasions with different books and text messages, different ideas and concepts and finance and leadership and all these cool things. And we jive on this one centric cause, which is becoming better every single day. And so a lot of the comments that were thrown around in the Be Extraordinary community have come from Brooks, and he's been an incredible collaborator with a lot of different other achievers in that group. So I'm stoked and excited to have you on, man. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, welcome, dude.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome.
I don't think we had all three of you in the last couple, so it's been nice to see all of you together. I was beginning to think that Rod was living in another country,
right?
And you guys were just like videoing him in, or
He might as well. He lives on a ranch now.
There was a restraining order. It's like 300 feet from them at all times, so Rod has to sit in their office over there.
You could do a lot with Photoshop, you know what I mean?
Yeah, man, but look what they do with me. You got it. You guessed it.
For those that are listening, I want to give you some context too. So Brooks, I wanted to kind of quick give a 30-second elevator pitch. I know you've been on this entrepreneurial journey to start your own company. You're seeing tremendous success. Hit the 7-figure mark. Have done some really cool things, and
huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, just from zero to something special, and your journey is just beginning. So for the listeners at home, give us a quick idea about Brooks Mechanical, what you guys do, and just kind of a quick summary of that.
Yeah, so Powell Mechanical Services is a HVAC provider, and what we're a service provider, it's direct to owner, service, repair, maintenances, unit replacements, stuff like that. But like we try to stay out of the contracting world. I don't do anything with a general contractor. We don't do a lot of residential. It's just strictly business to business. Yeah, it's pretty much where we're at. The company started back in pre-COVID, so we started like February of 2020, went through that COVID term, by the grace of God, got through that. Mm-hmm. And that's back when banks weren't giving out money and work was hard to come by. A lot of our relationship building happens face to face. People weren't meeting with people. It was like trying to figure out, navigate Zoom and all of that. So we started off with a couple of non-competes and a $0 revenue to get started, and got through the first year. Did pretty good. And then the second year did about 600K. And then the next year we did 900K. And this year we just cracked $1 million. Looks like we're in about $1.2 million.
Wow.
Heck yeah, man.
Real overnight success.
Congrats.
Bro, it's been a struggle. My partner, Frank Terizzi, is just such a hard worker too. He gets after it, and it's nice to be able to sit here with you guys and to build relationships with people and know that work on the other end's getting done. So without him, it would be like I always say, I'm the face, he's the talent. Which is
It's amazing.
How we leave it.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, so it's been fun. I feel like a lot of our efforts between building relationships with people and just getting back to business has really been paying off quite a bit. It seems like there's a gap in our industry right now with people that are really out there authentically building relationships and trying to just help people. Like it's really weird. Not to go down too much of a rabbit hole, but a lot of the folks that are in the HVAC industry in Central Florida, a lot of the owners are older. They're getting older. They started these companies in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, and here we are 2023, and a lot of them they're trying to figure out how do they transition out, right? So we're getting a lot of these big corporate conglomerates that are coming in and they're purchasing smaller companies and trying to purchase larger ones. Just this year alone, we've had 3 large acquisitions in the HVAC industry, and then we've had a couple of deaths. We've had some of the big names in Central Florida that have passed away for one reason or another. And I think that's really caused that, rift right now. And I think that's part of the reason that we're as successful as we've been recently. We had a significant growth this last year. We it was like 150%. I mean, we're over plan or over budget.
It's amazing.
People are taking meetings with me left and right. Like used to, it was like pulling teeth trying to get to see some of these people, but there's definitely a need right now. So it's been very fortunate.
That's amazing. I have a buddy that's in the roof contracting, like almost like consulting type business. And he said a lot of people were just deferring. It's like, it's probably the same. It's like, you can't defer it forever. And so at some point you're going to have to do these capital repair or what are they called? Capital expenses. Is that what is that?
Expenditure.
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, that's cool, man. Well, I just, for those that are listening, it sounds like if you're listening to this podcast and you're a property owner or you work with property owners, Brooks would be an incredible person for you to know, meet. So again, if you're looking for his contact information or you're looking to connect with Brooks after this podcast, you can do so in the Be Extraordinary podcast community. If you're on a podcast and you want to literally scroll down to the description, you'll see the link in there. If you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, if you scroll down to the description, the link is in there too. And we'll also make sure you guys get Brooks' information after this as well. So plus we got you a couple Be Extraordinary t-shirts, so we'll get some good selfies up after this.
I almost put it on right now. It's missing something. I'm thinking I have to cut the sleeves off it.
There you go.
While we're in there.
I dig that.
That's what you're missing.
I dig that. Well, man, let's dive into this. So, we were sitting around and we were having breakfast like we usually do every, couple months and just, kind of spitballing about what's going on in your world. Same with us. What are you challenged with? What's good? And doing the mastermind thing. And, you had brought up to me this incredible challenge or excursion that you went on, and I'm going to do my best to frame it here, and then I'm sure you'll be able to add a lot of context. But basically, you had told me, you're like, yeah, I just got back from a trip. It was insane. Flew to Maine and proceeded to hike the hardest, most challenging portion of the Appalachian Trail, which is the end, right. 110 miles.
Yeah, 110, 112, yeah.
110, 112 miles. You set out to do it in what, 9 days?
Yeah, I gave myself plenty of time. Like I was going to spend a couple of days in Maine and then, start hiking 10, 11 days, give myself some time, and then having a couple more days. So it was me 14 total, not 14 on trail.
And who did you go with?
Alone. I went by myself.
You went by yourself.
By myself. Yeah, that's
why?
Like, oh yeah, right. I'm on the airplane and I'm like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing?
Well, what's funny is like I didn't put 2 and 2 together because we were in the community and I think there was just an exchange going on or whatever, and you took a selfie on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, dude, he's on vacation. Good for him, And I get a backpack on, of course. And now hearing this story, which we're going to unpack, I'm thinking, this dude wasn't on vacation. He's getting his ass kicked up there.
Every day. So when we were at breakfast, I was explaining to Brett what was going on. But, I'm coming down off the mountain. You're invigorate. You're so full of life. You were like, man, I am living my best life right now. and then you shift focus and you're like, man, how, first off is how can I be better in my family? What do I need to do to kind of get in that? We'll talk about that later. We'll unpack that. But like, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? Like, how can I be the best person I can be? And then, you shift into business and you're like, I need to, part of the reason I went on this journey was to solve some problems, right? Some people go on meditation retreats, they do that. My brother Brian went on a yoga retreat to Costa Rica. That's his bag, not mine, but I'm not flexible at all. But that was part of it. Like he went there to find some answers, right? So as I'm coming down off this mountain, I've figured out some answers, So one of the first phone calls I made when I got back was Brett. I was like, dude, we got to meet, man. I got so much stuff I want to unpack. I got so many things I need you to help me process some of this stuff. So thank you for meeting with me. Thank you for your time, buddy.
Dude,
I always appreciate that.
Man. It's incredible.
I'm already blown away here because I've been on the Appalachian Trail with my wife though, so I guess it couldn't have been that extreme because I was there. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you did great.
No, it was pretty cool. We did a 5-mile section or 7-mile section in North Carolina one time. So you're setting out to do 112 miles by yourself. Where did this idea originate? And I mean, obviously it's I don't want to say obviously, doing hard things, wanting to do hard things, wanting to be somewhere in nature where you could get deep with yourself.
That's it.
What's the origin here?
So you hit a couple of on the head, Rod. Specifically, like we talk about, my wife calls it forest bathing. It's where you go out and you put yourself in this oxygen-rich environment, and you're working out, and you're exercising, and
What's that called again?
My wife calls it forest bathing. I don't know where she got that from, but I'm sure it's a term.
Okay.
But you're around all these plants and around these animals, and they're off-gassing, and you're just in this huge oxygen-rich environment, and you're really putting yourself through the ringer, and your mind gets clear. In cycling, they have a lot of the professional guys will sleep in hyperbaric chambers, and then as they get up in the morning, it's this oxygen-rich environment, and it feeds performance. So it's very similar to that.
What about if I'm in the Vegas bar and I've stopped by the oxygen bar
Exactly.
after breathing
That's what
in
you
a bunch
did.
of secondhand
Same thing.
Newport
Same thing.
smoke?
Yeah, same thing.
Very
Same
similar,
thing, yeah.
right?
Depends how many cocktails you've had before you got there. Right? So that's it. So that was a big part of it, to be out with nature, to get rid of distractions. We've talked, I read Gary Keller, The One Thing, and that was a huge, reference point for me, where it's like, you got to cut all the distractions out. You got to focus on the one thing.
Were you, I don't mean to jump you. Were you struggling? Were you at a point where you were struggling? Were you not clear on your path? I'm just thinking, I get what you're saying, and it all makes great sense, but it's like, or did you just wake up and say, I just want to do something difficult?
So, that's a big part of it. So the planning took about 8 months. It took me about 8-9 months to get ready, and as much as you can in Florida.
Cow.
I'm going through it, and I'll go through the training regimen. But the other thing is, I was listening to a podcast, and David Goggins was on. And Goggins talks specifically about how he went out and he ran his first marathon and his first ultra marathon. And he talks about how to qualify for a marathon, he was in the Marines, and he's Navy SEALs. And, he's carrying a lot of weight. He's like 250 pounds, just packed full of muscle or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go out and run this marathon. Because I do 1,000 push-ups and that type of thing. So he goes out there, and it's a ultra marathon, and it's around a trek.
Yeah.
And so he brings his wife with him. He sets up a chair and just a little bit of water, because he's this big, tough, strong guy or whatever. And it broke him. Like, he literally was going around, and he hit this point where it's like, here's this wall. I can physically see it. My body is telling me, right? He's been throwing up. He's got diarrhea. He's just forcing fluids down, and he hasn't stopped. He didn't quit. And that whole story that he tells around it was so inspiring to me. It's like he
got rhabdo.
I think so.
Explain that.
Rhabdo is just working the muscle over and over and over and over and over, and just continue to work it. You're almost rhabdomyosin or rhabdo. I don't know the full technical term. Maybe you know it, but it's overtraining. It's overtraining, and it starts eating you. And I mean, in the story, I remember the story well. He was
Yeah, he was
pooping blood. It was
bad.
He'd sit down to rest, and he'd be sitting in a puddle of just blood. Yeah,
and then he'd get up and he'd keep going, right? And then at the end of it, they were like, you got to go to the hospital, and he just convinced his wife at the time to take him home and put him in the shower, and he almost died there, right?
Yeah.
So that whole, that hearing that story, like that he puts out there, that was very inspiring to me. Like, what happens when we get to our limit? What happens when we physically get there? So I knew, being an avid hiker, novice at best, I was like, man, that would be the most challenging part that I could feasibly do right now, right? Like, I mean, Maine, that section of Maine is called the 100-Mile Wilderness. And the reason they call it the 100-mile wilderness is because there's only one way in and one way out on trail, right? So you come in, you're either going northbound south, that's the northern terminus or the northernmost point of the trail. You either start north and head south, or you start south and you head north, right?
One entry, one exit.
That's it.
So you really can't bail. You can't.
I found a way, but yeah, you really can't bail.
But in concept, you're going the distance, or else you got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you're getting extracted.
Talk about like a decision to be made, right? Like it's one thing to go, I'm going to do this trail, see how far I can get. It's another thing to go, I'm going to do this to where hell or high water. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's amazing.
I intended to put myself in a predicament, right? You know, we talk about Goggins running that track around like that. That was so much mental strength for him to get up and keep going around that track when he could have tap out was right there. Sure. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that story goes that the race was intended for 4 guys. And they were 4-man teams. They were sharing the relay, I think. And he's doing it by himself.
Yeah. I think it was an ultra, if I'm not mistaken, which is, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would have been like,
man.
So that's sort of, if you guys haven't heard it, you have to, whether you're a Goggins fan or not, you got to hear the story. I mean, the guy wills himself to the finish line. So
you hear this, you're inspired. You've been thinking, man, like I probably want to do this anyway, but what could it be? You say, this is it. I'm outside. I put myself in predicament. It's extremely difficult. It's an adventure. I can clear my head. This got all the ingredients. I'm ready to go. You pick this spot. What does that entail? You fly in, obviously, and do you have do you only bring what you're going to be carrying on the airplane? Like what?
So part of the 100-mile wilderness is there's no stops in between. There's no towns. There's nowhere to get off trail. Like a good part of the Appalachian Trail, you're on for 2 or 3 days, 15, 16, 20 miles, and then you're off. You're in a trail. So you hike out, you camp a couple of days, and then you either keep camping or you can stop and go into a town and figure it out there, right? So it's a lot of on and off. That section there, it's 10 days, 8, if you're fast, it's 8, but it's about, 10 days, 12 days that you're in the wilderness.
What's
right?
the average daily, what's the daily goal? How many miles a day? Is that how they work?
Yeah. So generally speaking, like the really good people will do 15, 16 miles. Like the people that are like these, ultra marathon shape, these through hikers as they call them, which is where they're doing the entire trail. So they've been on a trail for months and they're, physically and mentally prepared for that type of stuff. The novice person's probably going to do 8 to 11, 8 to 12, somewhere through there. And so,
and these are undulation. Like you're going up mountains.
I had a 3,000 foot day. You climb up, you climb down. You go up 3,000, you come down. Like it was brutal. And you can't stop up there. Like you can't.
Right.
We'll go into that in a minute. So to get ready for it, I essentially planned the trip. I said, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to start there. They have apps on your phone. You've got maps. You can, there's a lot of content online. So I just started mentally kind of going through it, trying to figure out what do I need? What do I not need? And then I flew from Sanford because I'm in Oviedo, but Sanford had a direct shot to Bangor, Maine. And then you catch basically a shuttle into the starting point, whether you're going north or south, they'll shuttle you in. So I flew to Bangor, spent the night in a hostel, and then they shuttled me to where I was going, and I took off. So that's pretty much it. To get ready for it, you're not used to it. So you guys have heard the term rucking, right? Which is
yeah.
So I literally did like 8-9 months of rucking. So I bought all of my gear. I packed my bag. I weighed it. I knew like my max weight was going to be 30 pounds. Like 30-pound pack was as heavy as I wanted to go. Everything I've ever read said, hey, if you bring 30 pounds in there, you're going to be sorry, right? So, I was like, okay, so I got my backpack. I get everything set up. I pack this thing. I get about 30 pounds of weight in it. And then I spend the next 9 months Florida hiking, which is just flat. Mm-hmm. So a lot of heavy miles, a lot of just, so I was doing like 17, 18, 19-mile hikes, a 30-pound pack.
Wow.
And you're not doing a lot. You're just kind of, it's up and down. It's, maybe 100 feet of elevation here or there, that type of thing. But it's just dead flat. Like nothing gets you ready for going up the side of a mountain here.
Right.
Like there's nothing you can do. So we have clients that have like 10, 15-story buildings. So, there's times where I would go out and I'd meet with the client and then I would climb their buildings up and down a couple of times before a couple hours, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to put my pack on and kill myself up and down your stairs for a few hours. And so that was the closest I could get to it. Wow. But nothing's like being up there. So
yeah, but that's no small training feat. I mean, I'm thinking about walking 18
stadiums.
miles on flat with because I'll mess around with some weighted vests at home, and it's amazing how much a 20, 25 pound difference makes. And usually I'll only go for 3, 4, 5 miles max. but times that by 3, it's not like that was a soft training regimen. That's a pretty legit training regimen.
Oh yeah, I got after it. Specifically with that. I mean, just the other thing is, like, we talk about our legs getting ready, but it's a lot of core stuff too. It's shoulders, it's core, it's, how do you handle the weight, right?
Yeah, your traps, getting used to handling on your shoulders kind of thing.
Moving through that stuff. And when you're up there, you use hiking poles. Like, some people don't because they're better than I am, but 90% of people use hiking poles. So down here I trained without them because we don't have anything crazy. I just figured, I'll get my core ready and stuff like that. So a lot of times I'd come back from, a Sunday hike. I'd get up in the morning and start break of dawn and then get done when I can. And I'm sore, I'm dehydrated. I've been fighting fatigue the whole way. My body, you get up the next day like a truck hit you. Right. And, I just knew, okay, I'm as close as I can get here. But nothing here prepared me for that. It was just, it was brutal.
So even with that reality and that, feeling that way when you got done training here, even that wasn't enough.
No, not for me.
So let's walk through this. So first day. You're excited?
Oh yeah.
So take your first step. You got your pack. You've taken inventory of what you need. You've prepared yourself mentally, spiritually, physically. You're there alone. You're excited. The journey, and you take that first step. Talk to us about that first day.
So I flew up on a Friday and I started hiking on Saturday, and that was when Hurricane Lee had come up. So on the airplane there, they're all joking. They're like, "Oh, you Floridian, you brought this hurricane with you, right?" So we get up there and I'm looking at the weather reports that Friday night, and everything's like, "Oh yeah. It's going to be out of here by Sunday. You're going to have a beautiful week and everything's going to be fine." Well, that turned out to be a bunch of bull. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll hike one day in the rain. I'm from Florida, because you're 10 feet tall at that point. Your adrenaline's pumping. You're excited. You've been planning 8 months for this thing. So I get out, I look at the trail sign, I got a picture of it. I'm like 100 miles, I'm pumped up. I'm excited. My adrenaline's at 10 and it's raining. And I'm like, that's all right. I just got to get through today. Right. So mentally you're like, just get through today. This is gonna be the worst day. Tomorrow is supposed to be beautiful. Right. So I take off, the town that I decided to go northbound. So I started in a town of Monson, which is the last town between Millinocket, which is the northernmost town. So these two towns, Monson and Millinocket, are that section of trail. Monson's the southbound or the southernmost, and Millinocket's the end of the trail, right? So I take off, I get to Monson, I get on trail and I start hiking, and it's raining. And I've got a couple of bottles of water. I weighed my pack before I left. I was like 24 and a half pounds or so with food, because you have to bring all your food in, right? You're not hunting for squirrels. There's nowhere to grab food. You know what I mean? I did meet a guy out there
digging for earthworms.
I thought about it a few times. I saw a guy out there with a fly fishing pole. I thought about buying it off him. So you're bringing everything with you. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to eat as I go. The food level's going to come down. I'm going to manage my water properly to make sure, I figured, okay, 24 and a half pounds, probably my heaviest weight. And then it's raining. Mm-hmm. So I hiked the first day. I get to a river. There's a red sign up that says, "Do not cross." I crossed it anyways. I was like, all right, it's not really a river. It's kind of like a stream. There's a little rope. So I'm hanging in, I'm navigating this river. I get across there. And I was like, man, I hope there's nothing else that's like that. So, I'm wet. You've been soaking wet all day. You're kind of prepared for it. Your bag's dry. You have everything's in plastic, and you put, a bag, a liner over inside of it, and you put something over it, and you keep everything dry because, hypothermia is a real thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of go through, and I get like 11 and a half miles done the first day. So I went from the starting point to what they call a lean-to, which is where the, it's basically a built shelter that you can sleep in. Mm-hmm. So I was not planning on pitching a tent in the rain. I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm gonna make it to this lean-to. I'm gonna dry up there and stuff like that. I met a few other hikers along the way that were going the other direction. So I get to the lean-to. I feel pretty good, after the whole day. So we started hiking at like 8 o'clock, and I got done at like 4:30 p.m. So I had a pretty good hike, and I think we did about 1,000 miles or 1,000 feet of elevation up and down. So I get to the lean-to, and I get all my stuff spread out in this little shelter, and I get everything dried up, and and I'm like,
you build a fire?
No, you bring your own camping fuel. So I made some hot food for myself there. Okay. And so I get dried up and I clean socks on or whatever. And I'm thinking, okay, Sunday's supposed to be beautiful, right? So I get up in the morning, still raining. And I'm like, it's all right. It's going to clear up at some point. So I get everything packed up, and I take off again. And I mean, I'm wet. So I put my wet socks back on. I put my wet clothes back on. I did all of that stuff again because there's no reason getting dry clothes done. And I take off on the next one, and I start hiking, and it's been raining for hours, like 4 or 5 hours straight. Not like a light rain, like it's pouring. And I start to head, like I'm looking, and I'm like, oh crap, there's a mountain between me and there, right? So I have a trail map. I've got it on my phone, or satellite, whatever. You can figure out where you are, what's in front of you, what's behind you, where to get water from, that type of thing. And I was like, all right, I need to refill my water bottles, right? Because I'm low. I'd gone through about 3 liters of water at this point, 4 liters. And I get to the stream. I fill my water bottle up. I go to squeeze it through the filter. Nothing comes out. I panic. I'm like, I have no way of filtering water, right? So I tested my water filter. I'd cleaned it. I'd done all this stuff to it. Something happened between the airplane and there, right? It wasn't cold enough for it to freeze, but I can't get water. I'm like, I have this water out of a stream, and I've got nothing, and I'm 12 miles. I'm a day and a half from where I was, or 16 miles, day and a half from where I came in at. I have nowhere to get water from. So I panic, and I'm like, oh man, I'm in trouble. So there's no cell phone service. You're out there on your own.
Do you have an inReach? Do you have some sort of inReach? Or no satellite.
I'm by myself. Yeah. So
I could see when you say panic, you're now talking about like some real trouble. This is no longer this hard thing that you're perceiving that you're going to conquer. This is like, whoa, survival / I'm in the wilderness by myself and something really went wrong. This escalates a level of cortisol that's probably really real.
Oh, it went to 10, man. It was like, I'm you come down off, there was a few climbs, nothing crazy, but it was like, by nothing crazy. It's a couple hundred feet up, couple hundred feet down, couple hundred feet up, couple hundred feet down. But I haven't really hit the real climbing yet. Like that was coming later in the day.
So like, what do you do at that point? Do I keep going?
I was like, I'm banging this thing on a rock.
I was going to say, you can't go any further till you sort this water thing out.
Right. I'm like, am I going to have to boil water, or what's going to happen next? So, and then you're like, man, I can't sleep here. There's nowhere to camp. There's nothing close by.
And
like,
you have nobody to ask.
Yeah,
that's
alone.
I want to get to that because the aloneness is a whole nother factor, because you're not looking at Rod and saying, hey man, what do you think we should do?
Do you have an extra filter?
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead. So
I'm like, I don't know what to do at this point, right? So I'm like, am I going to boil water? So like that next 15, 20 minutes of my brain just was like, what the heck did you do? Like, why did you put yourself here? You could be home in your bed. Yeah. You could get up, get some coffee. You could be hanging out with your kids right now, you idiot, So, but then you think back to that Goggins thing, you're like, man, this guy pushed through that. And mentally, this is what I came to do. I just did not expect to get it. The middle of the second day, I was like, okay, day 5 or 6, but hit me middle of the second day. So I finally I'm like, well, if I'm going to break this thing, I'm going to break it. So I'm tapping it on a rock. I'm forcing as much water through it as I can. And finally it starts to flow a little bit, but it's rough. Like I'm squeezing the tar out of this bottle, trying to get water through it. So I'm like, all right, well, this is good enough. So I spend, about 20, 30 minutes there just trying to get all that sorted out. And I was like, all right, well, you know what? I'm going to get up over this next mountain pass, and then I'll find a place to set up camp if I can't get this working. I'll boil water, and I'll just boil water through the evening, and I'll, fill my bottles that way. It's going to be a slow process, but I thought, okay, you can get through this. You're fine. So I pack up, get all my water stuff sorted out best I can, and I head up this mountain, and it's like 1,600 feet, right? So I'm at the basin of this thing. I'm going through there's like 5 or 6 mountains that I crossed up and down. So this is number 1, right? I've been climbing, but not a mountain, right? Mm-hmm. So it's pouring down rain on a Sunday.
What's the temperature roughly?
During the day, it was in the hot mid 60s, so it wasn't bad, right? It was pretty nice, especially for exercising. And the night it got down to the high 30s.
Wow.
So
Damn.
then,
being wet is not ideal.
That's where that really starts to matter.
Yeah. Well, if you can't get dry, and warm at night, you're in trouble. Hypothermia is a real thing, especially at 30 degrees. So that was a big thing with the river crossings. Cause we're from Florida, man. Like if I see a river here and I don't have anything, I'll swim it. I don't care. But it's different when you have everything that you need to survive on your back.
Yeah.
Right. So if my sleeping bag got wet, if some of my dry clothes got wet, it's not going to dry. Like right. You could really be in some trouble. Like you got to start a fire and
you're layering up to get in your sleeping bag probably.
Yeah. I'm wearing pants and a jacket, and I'm in a sleeping bag that's rated for down to 15 degrees. And if that sleeping bag gets wet, you've got nothing.
Yeah.
If
those surely won't dry.
Yeah. No, it's a down. It's a goose down. So it's like they don't dry quickly. They don't dry at all, really. So super warm, super light. You're in trouble. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll, it's supposed to clear up here, because I'm thinking about the weather report I saw a couple of days ago. You're out there, you got no cell phone reception, you have nothing, right? So I get up on top of this mountain, I climb, I'm doing about 1.5 miles an hour. So down here, I'm cruising 3 miles an hour. Up there, like you're 1.5 miles, mile and a quarter an hour, and you're moving pretty good with that amount of weight. So I spend like the next 2 or 3 hours climbing up the side of this mountain. I get to the top of it. And it's one where you have to literally, like, your feet are on the rock and you've got to lean into it. So I'm up there, it's blowing, it's, there's 30, 40 mile an hour gusts because that hurricane, unbeknownst to me, is still hanging out over there in Nova Scotia, kind of off the coast. And I'm soaking wet and the rocks are wet and I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm in the top of this mountain. This is sketchy as all get out,
Dangerous.
And you can't go back. Like, there's no going back. You got to just keep going forward. So, a lot of prayers, a lot of, hey, God, I don't know what I did, but get me home to my kids, on day 2, right? And so, just attributed a lot of that to, the adrenaline and the cortisol levels and stuff like that, and just kind of willing your way through it. So I came down off of this thing. I started to head down, and I fell down a few times. It's wet. You're going down. It's not like a paved trail. This is rocky terrain.
What's the wildlife situation?
It's not bad up there.
Okay.
Like, they have black bears, but they haven't had a black bear attack in like 100 years.
You see any moose?
No bears. I saw like moose. You don't see them, but I caught not caught one, but I caught a glimpse of one time. Yeah. But they're like deathly quiet. Like they're the quietest animal you can imagine. So I came down off this mountain. I'm looking for everything. And everyone says, hey, I've never seen a moose. I've seen one. I've seen some big turtles up there and stuff like that. But I finally get down this mountain and I'm like, all right, I got to set up tent. I got to figure out where I'm camping at. I got to figure out where I'm going to. And I'm looking on the map. There's nowhere. So now I'm like, okay, I got to find a clearing that I can get a level ground in and try to set up tent or set up camp. So I found that and I set up my tent, pulled it out of my bag, in the rain, supposed to be dry that day. Made myself some food, got myself dried off, got my sleeping bag, went to bed at like 6 p.m. Got up the next morning at like 6 a.m. and I'm a little sore. My knees are sore. My ankles are sore. I'd been working on the water situation all night. I'd crossed that's the next day. So I pack all my gear up, have a breakfast, and I start going. And this day is like 2 mountains, going up and down these 2 mountains. And I think it was like 10.8 miles that day.
But a harder 10.8.
Yeah, a lot. I think that day it was like 2,500 feet of climbing. It was like 1,300 feet for one and then another 12 or whatever, up and down.
So were you boiling water or did you get the filter to work good enough to where you didn't have to do that at night?
I was a little bit of both.
Okay.
So I had boiled some of the water when I had time, and then I was using the filter as much as I could.
Got it.
And then so the third day I was kind of in between the 2 mountains. I'd got up and gone up the mountain, still raining, hadn't stopped raining yet. God. I finally get to the top of the mountain, and there's someone up there going the other direction, and I'm like, hey,
Yeah.
help me, help me. I need to do something with this water filter. So we were talking about it, and I ended up getting some cell phone reception. And so the person that I met, the guy had a water filter, so he let me use his. So I filled my 2 bottles up with clean water. I called the hostel that I had stayed at, and they said, hey, do this. And they gave me a couple of tricks on how to clean it, and that appeared to have worked. And, so I was like, okay, I think that took the panic level down a little bit. So then I take off and I go up the next mountain, and I finally get to the top of that second mountain that day. I'm probably 6 out of 10 miles in, like 6. The second mountain was like 6.8 or something like that, 7 miles out. And, it's clear. It's beautiful outside.
So this is the first time it's sunny.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's not sunny, but it's clear.
Right.
Like, yeah,
oh, there you go. That's a good distinction.
Yeah. It's clear.
It stopped precipitating.
Yes, sir.
What real quick, let's stop here for a second, because number one, I have a couple questions. Number
Sure.
one, what was that feeling like when all of a sudden the rain stopped?
It was exhilarating. You're like, okay.
Like immediately, or were you going, you didn't notice, and then all of a sudden you looked around and be like, holy shit.
I don't know at that point, Brett. I think I realized it when I got to the top of the mountain. It's your head down. You're like, I am a hammer looking for a nail.
You got to concentrate on the hike, right? I mean, your footings, it's not, you're not walking on a sidewalk. Yeah. You're not even walking on a foot trail, really. You're on that part of the trail. I'm assuming there's a lot of roots and ruts, and
it's a lot of rocks.
slippery.
It's a lot of
Yeah.
You're walking literally the trail is the waterway, so the water's coming down off the mountain.
Yeah, you sprain an
across
angle
these
out there,
rocks.
you're in trouble.
Oh yeah, helicopter you out. Yeah, if you're lucky.
So all right, so it stops raining. You're like, holy moly, okay, wow. Probably take an exhale. You've got an exhale from the filter a little bit. What I'm sure that was like, okay, all right, sweet, we're making progress. But what was being alone like? What does that feel like? Because like that's gotta be different. You're going through all these challenges and stuff, and you don't really have anybody to share it with. You can't call anybody, you can't text anybody, you can't talk to anybody. It's just you and you. How was that harder than you thought it would be, or was it comforting? Talk to us a little about that.
At the beginning, you don't really notice because you're just, you're kind of in your own head. Like I never, it takes a while for me to disconnect, right? I'm never, alone for very long in my life with a wife and 2 small kids, and people that depend on me. So the first day, I'm just singing. I didn't bring any music. I brought nothing. Wow. A couple of books. I brought a book with me, a couple of small books just in case, that type of thing. And so I'm just kind of just talking to myself. I'm singing to myself. I'm saying prayers. I'm screaming at things. I'm just doing whatever I can do to kind of keep my mind occupied. And then the first day, and then the second day, everything quieted down. Like my mind just slowed down. Like everything got quiet. Like it felt like a routine. I got up, I looked, I said, okay, this is how far I'm going. And then I spent the next of the day just kind of in my own head. Right. And I did that for a couple of days, but that, specifically day 2 and 3, even through all that trial and, the amount of stuff that I had to deal with, it was just, motivational thoughts. It's staying focused on, the task at hand. I didn't really spend a lot of time that day just working through problems, right? It was more about just kind of quieting everything down.
And when you say quiet, were you more immersed in when you say the task at hand, were you more immersed in the present problems and the present situation relative to like the first day? You probably have lingering thoughts from work, from business, from family,
excitement,
like those problems that you're trying to quote unquote solve by going on this journey. Did they kind of fade away as you got into this more quiet time?
Yeah, that's exactly. Like it just became more, my thoughts of my children and the thoughts of my wife and stuff really just kind of went away during that time. It was more about it was being more self-reliant. It was just thinking through potential problems that could come up, sorting through the problems that I had. But everything got I stopped singing to myself. I stopped talking to myself. I stopped telling myself stupid jokes. Like I just kind of went through and just kind of kept moving forward. And I didn't expect that either. Like I wasn't expecting that early either. I don't know if it was just coming down off of the adrenaline rush. I don't know if it was just kind of working through that. So by the time I got to the top of the mountain, everything was quiet. Like it was no one's around. It's just me on the top of this mountain. The sun, the rain had stopped. It's still pretty overcast, but the rain had stopped. You can see every lake in Maine. I mean, it was just a beautiful sight. I sent a couple of pictures out on the Be Extraordinary community page and, sent some out. I had some cell phone signal at that point too. So I text my wife and just said, hey, I'm fine. Everything's good. And she was like, be careful. And so I was like, okay, all right. I mean, you're here, you're doing it. That had to be the worst, right? That was what I was thinking in my mind. That had to be the worst. It wasn't, but I was like, that had to be it. Right. Wow. So, I come down off the mountain, I find a place to camp, and everything seems better, right? I'm like, okay, it's still raining a little bit here and there, but it's not like what it was. And, food was great, situation was great, everything seemed to be pretty good. I'm a little bit sore, my knees are sore, my feet are sore, that's to be expected. So I get up the next day after camping, and I load my gear up, and my bag is so much heavier. Like I could not figure out what it was, right? And I was like, is it me? Am I just kind of getting soft, or am I not used to it or whatever? And then I realized I was like, man, my tent weighs about 5 pounds, about 4 pounds fully packed, maybe 3.8, something like that. 3 pounds 8 ounces, 3 points. So I pick it up. I'm like, oh man, this is noticeably. Well, that water had, that on the tent, you pack all that water up with you. So I'm literally carrying an extra couple pounds of water, and you don't think about a whole lot, right? We go to the gym, add an extra pound to the rack, right? That's nothing, right? But when it's on your back and, it's different.
Yeah.
So I take off and on day
there's
3.
no way to get rid of it. I mean,
I mean, I wringed everything out best I could, but you're in the rain.
Yeah.
Your socks are wet.
Unless you have dry and wind and you got a line, you're going to hang it and
your
sit there for hours and let it cool off or let it dry out.
Yeah.
Everything's socks are wet.
Everything's wet.
Are your feet okay at this point?
I'm all right at this point.
Well, isn't that what they say, like in the military? I mean,
your feet.
That's what they said in Forrest Gump.
Take care of your feet, right? It's like you got to keep your feet dry, right?
You can't there. Like you're walking through pie. I gave up at a certain point to keep my feet wet or keep my feet dry just because there was just no. So I was thinking more of, okay, if I put dry socks on, they're going to be soaking wet again.
So did you have one pair of hiking boots and a backup, or just one pair?
I brought up what we call like a water crossing shoe, which is basically like a light shoe that you would use for whatever. But even so, like having, your shoes get wet, and then what are you going to do? You're going to either put them on your back where it's raining on top of them again, or you're going to stick them in a bag where they're not going to dry, right?
Sure.
So most people, one pair of shoes.
Okay. So you're all right. So you're marching the deal. It stopped raining at this point?
No, it's still raining.
It started raining again.
Yeah. So you just had that short little.
You just got a.
You had an hour. Yeah.
You had an hour.
I got an hour. Hour of sunshine. Not really. Got an hour.
What are we, day 4?
I'm in the middle of day 3. I've been hiking up, and again, same thing there. So I went over like a series of 6 mountains. So I did the first mountain day 2, and then 2 mountains day 3. So I'm in day 4, and middle of day 3, heading towards day 4, and I'm on my second mountain of the day, and I'm miserable. I mean, my feet hurt, my back hurts, my knees hurt. I'm not a big proponent of taking Advil or Motrin or whatever. It's not, but in this time, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start taking some Motrin. I'll start taking some whatever. Like I could tell that I'm having some inflammation.
Yeah.
So I start taking anti-inflammatory stuff, and and I'm drinking as much water as I can get through, and I'm just kind of dealing with it. And I get to the top of the mountain at the middle of day 3, and I met a woman there. Her name is her trail name is Twister. We all have trail names.
I knew that.
Part of it.
I was waiting for this part.
Yeah. Her trail name is Twister.
What was your trail name?
My trail name is Brooks, and everyone's like, "Oh, that makes sense." Yeah,
when we were in North Carolina that time, we were hiking along, and we came across people that had been out for months.
Yeah.
And one of them was injured, and we took him into town.
Yeah.
And they were calling themselves. I mean, one of them was Kitty Cat or something. One of them. I mean, they all 3 of them had names, and they, So I was waiting for you to.
Oh yeah, I met Styx and Yogi Bear and Twister and Poet and Trash Panda and all types of fun people. So along the way, so I meet this lady. She's from Milton, which is near Panama City, and she's older. She's in her mid-50s or whatever. She's been on and off trail for months, going in, going out. And I met her on the top of the mountain, and she's like, "Dude," she's like, "You need some help." And I was like, "Yes, I do. I need some. Like, I need. I've been alone for." 3.5 days, 4 days. And this is the first person you meet people passing, but they're going one way, you're going the other. You're not sitting down to have a conversation. And I was like, "Where are you heading?" She's like, "I'm heading northbound." I was like, "Okay, well, I'm going northbound too." So we hiked together the next day, and, we hiked down the mountain together. I'm in rough shape. My knees are hurting. My feet are hurting. And it's not just sore, right? I mean, soreness is one thing, but like I can tell that something bad's going on, right? So, and then like every 4 hours I'm taking pain medication. I don't take pain medication. So like I'm thinking about that, the ramifications from that too. So I'm talking to Twister, and I'm like, "Hey, we're sharing stories, and she's super nice lady. She's sharing food, and she's letting me use her water filter, and we're looking at maps and stuff like that." And she came super prepared. So like when I met her, I realized how unprepared I was when I walked out there. So I was physically prepared, but I meet her, and she's got bear spray, and she's got a GPS, and she's got it all planned out. And I'm like, man, I am fumbling through life right now. Didn't bring enough food, it's just all this stuff. So we hiked down together, and she's the sweetest person I've ever met. And we set up camp together, and we get up the next day, and my knees are really hurting, and my toes are hurting. So I had broken both toenails on both big toes on my feet. And so that night, I'm kind of like, I don't want to go too much graphics, but I'm digging them out because I'm like, man, I am in this hurts so bad, And I'm just thinking back to Goggins. I was like, David Goggins wouldn't quit with 2 broken toenails, So I was like, I'm going to be pooping blood before I get out of here.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so bad.
That hurts.
Didn't get much sleep. The adrenaline had been pumping all day and whatever, but it was nice to find this person to talk to and to commiserate with and to, whatever. So we start hiking, and we're heading towards this area called, it's Hagenbrook is what it's called, but it's essentially a stream, a big water crossing and stuff. And so I'm talking with Twister, and she's checked the weather, and it's supposed to rain for like the next 3 days.
Holy jeez.
So I was like, crap, I got 1 hour of sunshine. So we go up and over top of a mountain, and we start heading down on day 4. And there's this river that we have to cross. And we get over there, we're looking at it, and it's dicey. Like it's up to your middle of the thigh, and Twister's like, I don't think I can go. Like I don't think I can do it. And me, I'm an idiot. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go. Like we're gonna do this, right? So I start heading across, and I get halfway through. I look back. She's like, I don't think I'm gonna go. So I get all the way to the other side, and she finally gets up the nerve, and she's like, I can do this. So she comes across, and I'm cheering her on. You got this. You're gonna do great, or whatever. She gets across. It's about probably 5 o'clock their time. Sundown's at 7. We got to get 2 miles to where we're camping. You can't camp in that section. It's protected, right? So we hike 2 miles, and we find this beautiful little spot. Like it's been raining. It's tree coverage. It's dead flat. And I'm like, man, this is the spot to be. Or I was like, this is maybe the best camping we've had, So I'm talking to Twister, and she goes, all right, I'm going to set up my tent over here. I was like, all right, I'm going to set up over there. So at like 11 o'clock at night, I wake up because I've got my hand down and it's cold. Well, the water had come. I was in a waterway. The water was coming down off the mountain. It was up, and my entire tent was kind of just floating. So I'm looking around, and all my stuff's dry, luckily, because the way my tent was set up, it's called a bathtub tent, so it wraps around. But I'm like, man, this is going to suck. Like I am in. So I went back to bed. I get up in the morning, and like, I set up like on a stream. Now, any hiker out there is like, you're an idiot. You should have known better, but that's...
Because the stream rises during, just like a tide would rise?
It had come down off the mountain. The water was looking somewhere to go, yeah. So I was like, oh, man, this is not good. So same thing. My knees are hurting. My feet are hurting. I'm talking to Twister, and we're looking at the map, and we're like, hey, there's a river crossing like 4 miles from here, and we're looking at there's an app where you can message each other and stuff like that, and so she's getting messages from her friends through her satellite stuff saying, hey, that river crossing's closed. So if you get there, you have to hike out like 17 miles. Like you get there, you're going to have to hike 17 miles. You're stuck. Like you can't either go up over top of that mountain and wait or, hike 17 miles out. So we're like, well, what if we double back? What if we go back the way we came, and we'll find another way, and we'll just get a shuttle, we'll find somebody to pick us up and bring us around. So we started hiking back, and we realized the river that we had crossed, that stream, that Hagenbrook stream,
is higher now.
Is now up to our waist.
Oh, man.
It's not crossable. Oh, my God. So we're like,
waist makes it uncrossable because the current's probably crazy, right?
It was coming, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no way. I started stepping out there a couple of feet to try to figure out how far it was, and it was going to take us away. There's no way we could have done it.
It's probably more violent too. The more water, that means it's rushing down off the mountain, so the current's probably whipping her.
Yeah, I'll show you some video of it. Like, there's no way we can get back. So they show an alternative. We're like, okay, we'll go to this alternative. So we hike a couple of miles over to the alternative. It's flooded. There's no way you can get through there. It's moving pretty well. So we started hiking. We're like, all right, we're gonna have to camp here. So we started hiking to this campground, and there's water the whole way. There's nowhere to camp. So we're literally, we're stuck. We're on this island, right? Literally. I mean, it's not an island, but the water had circled us, so we're on an island.
Jeez.
So finally we're like, all right, if we can get over to this side over here, there's a campground and there's a road. And if we can get to that road, we can we'll take the road out. We'll find somebody to pick us up. So we're looking, and there's a stream up ahead, and by stream, it's pretty long. And so it's deep, it's long. I was like, we can't cross this. Well, we start looking, there's some down trees. So I'm like, okay, well, we can we'll sit on one of these trees and scooch our butt all the way over. So I find a tree. It's like this big around, right? And I'm kind of standing on it, trying to see if it's going to move, and it moves a little bit. I was like, I'll take it. So I literally moved my butt across this tree to get over to the other side of the river. It's like a 60, 70-foot tree. It's a huge, massive tree in the middle of Maine. Wow. And Twister's like, I can't do it. I'm too, like, if I fall in, I'm in big trouble. I'm going to die. Like, I can't do this. So we spent like the next hour or so trying to find a tree she could cross. So we literally walked up, half a mile this way, or 3/4 mile there. Finally found a massive tree that had fallen from Hurricane Lee, and she was able to get across it. So we get in this campground, and we start hiking. We find the road, right? So it's a campground where people actually, they would drive their cars in and set up camp, right? But it's like, 20 miles from anywhere. So we started hiking down the road, and we finally get cell phone service. And we called the hostel that we had stayed at and was like, hey, could you guys pick us up? We want to get back on trail somewhere. And they're like, not today, tomorrow morning. So they told us where to meet them. We hiked there. We set up a tent and everything, set up our campsite, and they showed up the next day to pick us up at 10. And the guy who picks us up, his name's Poet, and they own a hostel in Monson called Shaw's. And Poet's from Ocala. And
Ocala, Florida.
Ocala, Florida.
How about that?
And he's like, hey, Brooks, you don't look good, man. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, have you been thrown up? I'm like, no. He goes, dude, you look like death right now. Like, I saw you before you left. I see you now. Something's wrong. And I'm like, I feel like crap. And he was like, when was the last time you peed? And I was like, oh, I haven't used the bathroom since like 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, dude, you're from Orlando. You're an idiot. Like, you're dehydrated. You're in bad shape. So I'm not getting enough water for my water filter. I wasn't doing enough there. So he starts pumping me full of Gatorade. He's got some in the back, and I'm drinking Gatorade. And he's like, you start throwing up, we're going to the hospital. Like, you're not going back to the hostel. I'm going to take you to the hospital. You need to get an IV if this doesn't work. So, I have a couple liquid IVs, and I'm, got some clean water, and I start to take the fluids in or whatever. And the moment that happens, my knees went from looking normal to like the size of grapefruits.
They flame up.
Oh my God.
And my feet flame up. And I'm like, now all of a sudden I'm like trying to get my shoes off because I'm like, why are my shoes tight all of a sudden? So we get back to the hostel. Poet brings us back there, and he's like, let me see your shoes. And I show him, and he's like, what size shoe do you wear? I'm like, I'm like 10 and a half, 11. He goes, what size are those? I'm like, 10 and a half and 11. He's like, no, man, like, classic mistake. Always go a size up. So as I was coming down the mountains, my toes were cramming in the front. That's what caused the knee problem. That's what caused the toe breakage.
No kidding.
Right? We don't figure that out here. Everything's flat.
Right.
So it was, so I finally am like, he's like, hey, you're not going back out on trail. So I got about 55 miles, and then we hiked about 11 miles out before he picked us up. So about 66 miles, and 55 of that was towards my goal, which was to get to the next thing. So I was like, all right, well, I'll hang out here a couple of days, and then where do we go back on? He's like, well, you're going back on like 24 miles north of where you are. So I was like, well, that's halfway there. I don't want to, only have, that's only going to leave me like 13, 14. It's going to give me like 2 days worth of hiking. And he's like, well, if we're going to take you in, you're going to be here 3 or 4 days. I'm not taking you back out until the inflammation comes down. Like, sorry, you're stuck. So I'm like, crap. And he goes, and then you're going to go here, and it's all just downhill from there. Like, all the fun parts.
Because he's worried about you, right? You don't want to drop you back off, and you.
That was it. And then they had it. He'd been rescuing stranded hikers all the last 2 days.
Yeah.
Like, all the rain and water had crossed.
Yeah.
The trees were down. The river levels were high. You were not going. He was like, hey, I can't take you back there because literally you're going to hike 2 miles. There's a river you can't cross. Yeah. So I can't take you back there. I've been taking people out all day. So we were like, okay.
Gosh.
So I was like, all right. So I get back into Bangor, and I switch my flight over, and I find a hotel. And the hotel's like, where do you want your room to be at? I was like, where's your nearest ice machine? So I literally am right near the ice machine. I'd stumble up. I get a couple of bags of ice, get them on my feet, get them on my ankles. And then I drank so much water and fluids and Gatorade and everything I get in me the next couple of days. And then finally got back to normal. Still had a lot of inflammation on the knees and the feet. So that was the end of the trip. That's
amazing.
That was it. So I got in.
Were you disappointed? Were you relieved? Was it both? Like,
yeah, you didn't quit. You had somebody that said, "I'm quit. I'm throwing the towel for you."
God took me out. Yeah.
I was
like,
I mean, you would have kept going.
Yeah, if that river would have been crossable, I could have been really in dire straits. And I think that's the scary thing to think about. Like, I was going to keep going. I was like, I was in, we keep referencing Goggin, but I was in that mindset.
and you would have been dehydrated. You would have had 4 days left. I mean, you would have been toast.
So I'm curious about, I think about you preparing like you prepared in Orlando, and all the up and down, and with your ruck and all the weight and everything. Where did you settle on a 25-pound pack, and where did you settle on what you were going to put in the pack? Because you mentioned when you got there and you met Twister, you weren't even close.
Yeah, I didn't have enough food. I should have brought
did you follow a model? Did you follow, I mean,
There's just a lot of information online. So, a couple of YouTube channels, you follow that. There's a lot of blogs and stuff online, podcasts, stuff like that. So I was just kind of going through it. And then the actual Appalachian Trail will post, hey, you cannot go in. So literally there's the sign when you get in that says, you must bring 10 days worth of food and a water filter or do not enter, right? Wow. So you kind of get some of that. But I had followed some people to get ready for it, a couple of hikers online, and had done that. And then we have REI here, which is a beautiful store. And a lot of those folks have done that. So you go in and you kind of get your gear sorted out, and they'll do what they call shakedowns, which is where you do that. They'll check all your gear and weigh you and all that stuff. And then the hostels are the same way. Like I was Poet over at Shaw's and Monson, they do shakedowns all the time, which is where they go through and they make sure you have everything you need. Because it's the same thing. Like they
don't want to save you because you didn't know any better. Because then it puts pressure. So let's unpack that for a second. Because there's a lot there. Number one, what a cool story. I mean, I love it because I've looked at like what hard things are, and I think to myself, but like, what if I don't make it? And it's like, well, what if you don't start? Like, what if you don't do it? I can't imagine the adversity. Just hearing it, just living it through your story is level 10, right? Like, so I mean, what are some of the takeaways that you take away from the experience? I mean, when you got home, I'm sure it's just like this relief, but like, what, if you were to maybe jot down 3 things that were the things that stuck out to you, this experience, what were those, or what are those, and which ones are unexpected that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I had a couple of days in the hotel before I left. Like I had a couple of days in Bangor, and I was talking to my wife, and she's like, "You need to journal. You need to write everything down. You need to process your thoughts and your emotion and what had gone through most of it." So I did that. I spent, at first you're kind of struggling for words, and then it hits you, and you start to, a good cup of coffee. Now I'm cruising. The things I'm most proud of, that I take away from is the fact that you don't know until you know. Like, you literally have to go and experience it. You have to put yourself into that situation. You have to try. And I knew going up there, that there was a good chance I was going to at some point fail, or I wasn't going to be able to do it. Right. And that's part of the reason I wanted to go into that situation, because I didn't want any easy tap outs. I did not want anything that was going to just be like, oh, that seems like it would be, cause I didn't want to give myself any excuses. But I knew at some point in time that there was going to be some adversity. So I was looking for that. I knew that I was going to challenge myself. I was going to hit a wall, and I knew that I was going to have to figure out, who I was right then and there. Like, am I going to press on? Am I, I'm listening to guys like David Goggins. I'm listening to some of these people, Tom Bilyeu, that talks about, like, it's all in your mind. You just, you got to start something. You got to not be prepared to fail, and you just got to keep pushing forward. So, I got in that mindset. I took off, and I learned a lot about myself. Like there was plenty of times where I could have just curled up in a ball and cried, but nobody would have heard you. Right? You're in this situation where you're alone, right? You gotta process these things in real time. You gotta think about them. You can't ask for advice. You just gotta work your way through it. So I feel like one of my big takeaways is I'm a lot more resourceful, and I'm a lot more, stubborn and resilient than I give myself credit for.
Probably tougher than you thought you were.
Yeah. I going up there, I was like, you get your adrenaline's going or whatever, but then there's all this self-doubt in your mind. Like, can I do this? Right. I mean, the toughness and the, hey, I'm this big, bad human being or whatever, that's a facade. Right. And deep down inside, you start thinking, okay, am I strong enough to do this? Can I will myself to it? Right. And so that section of Maine for people is, some people are going to go up there and they'll be like, yeah, it was a piece of cake. I walked up, sunny day, and just lived my life. Right. But I'm not that person. Like, it kicked my ass, for 5 days. And I was looking for that. I'm very fortunate that I found it early.
There's a couple things that stick out to me in the preparation. You mentioned going to REI, you mentioned following people, but then you also realize that regardless of the preparation, until you're on the journey, you don't get the context of maybe that scenario till you meet Twister, of saying how unprepared I actually was.
Yeah, man.
Until you're on it. So there's some surprises, along with the takeaways for me is there's surprises in the weather, right? You maybe thought it was going to rain for a day. You would never expected or prepared that it's going to rain for 5. And you're there and you're having to deal with these surprises. One question I have that is maybe a little off, and hopefully it'll appease me in doing it. But I just think about all that alone time and in those scenarios where stress rises, panic arises, you're looking to work through a problem with somebody and they're not there, or I could sit there and cry, but no one's going to hear me. During that time when you leveled out and it got quiet, did you feel closer to God, further from God, or was it?
I definitely felt closer to God. because you're asking for strength, right? You're asking for strength. You're asking for whatever. Prayer for me is more meditation than anything, right? Like everybody has a different relationship with God, spiritually, but like prayer is like the ultimate form of meditation, right? I mean, you literally can sit down in a quiet place and so I've always tried to, from a prayer standpoint, do that, from a relationship with God standpoint, to do that when I don't need help, right? To make the time, make it a habit to be able to talk and to get some of that stuff out and to meditate that way, in that regard. But there was a lot of that. I'm on the top of a mountain, pouring down rain. It's sketchy as heck. Where I'm like, God, please help me. Like, save
God,
my
I know
life
I've made
right
enough
here.
deposits when I didn't need you.
Yeah.
I need you right now.
I've been so good. So I would say that it brought me closer to God. Like I definitely found a lot more strength once we got to that point.
Go ahead.
You said, you didn't accomplish your goal. You got 55 plus the 11. So you got 66 of your goal. I look at that and go, I got 66 miles on the Appalachian Trail, and probably with some of the most extreme conditions that you could build up, right? And you reference Goggins a lot, and he talks a lot about his cookie jar. And I'm thinking to myself,
oh yeah.
You didn't just put a cookie in there, man. You put a whole pack of Oreos in. That was like a family pack of Oreos. I mean, just because of, I just think about the 66 miles was difficult. But there are so many subsections of difficult in those 66 miles that I think you didn't just say, I went 66 miles, there's a cookie in the cookie jar. Day one was what there. What was the diversity?
So
I say diversity. Adversity. What was the adversity? Day one, day two, day three, day four, day five. What was the adversity that you probably didn't even recognize that was adversity until you left? So I just look at it and go, man. There's just so many things to draw from the tough standpoint, and so many deposits in that cookie jar that when I say, are you tougher now? That's got to be hard to quantify mentally what that can do to build you up.
I definitely feel a lot tougher now, mentally and physically. Like getting away from that. We talk about leadership, and we talk about leading a team, and about how we have to lead by example, and we have to do hard things, and we have to not be afraid to fail. So, in hindsight, not getting to the end of it, I don't feel like a failure for that. Like like you said, I filled a whole cookie jar. I fought the good fight. I did everything I could physically do to make it happen. And there was a river and a really nice, kind woman that stopped me from killing myself. So I'm very thankful for that. God helped out with that. So that was a big thing. Once I came back and I processed it, I felt really tough. I was like, man, I really set out, like, that journey was supposed to be challenging. Luckily I found it in the first 66 miles. The rest of it was a breeze. Like, for some reason, God pulled me out right. I went through over these series of mountains, and that's one of the hardest stretches of trail, on the entire trail. Like, it is one of the hardest. Maine they don't have switchbacks. It's up and down. Mm-hmm. There's no back and forth. Mm-hmm. There's no bridges. That's one of the hardest sections of trail, of wilderness. So I really felt like, okay, I'm a winner. I got my ass kicked. I pushed as far as I could go. And then, as I'm sitting there processing it, before I'm coming home and I'm writing things down, I just felt very lucky I didn't get hurt. I felt very fortunate that something had stopped me and that I had an opportunity to pull, to get out before I had really been injured.
Man, that's funny you mentioned that, Rod, and that's such a good context, Brooks, because for me, I come back to how we opened the show, is that who's to say you didn't accomplish the goal?
That's right. I got there, yeah. Absolutely.
You did accomplish the goal.
Sir. Absolutely, 100%.
The goal is not to run the marathon. The goal is not to do the Ironman. The goal is not to finish 112 miles on the Appalachian Trail. The goal is to put yourself in a situation that you don't think you can get through.
Right.
And once you think that's the worst of it, then get to the next one that's even worse than the one before that. And then you thought you were at your max and can meet the next one that you thought you couldn't even meet. And then all of a sudden you're 3-4 levels deep into this thing that you thought you were done, days ago.
Right.
And you go, man, there's more in the tank. And you had the ability to mentally push past that veil of, false expectation of yourself or confined to your limitations, and kind of see what else is in there. So I look at it and go, man, I think sometimes even me, I get lost in like, okay, what's the challenge?
Right.
Let me make sure I accomplish my goal. And it's like, dude, that's not the goal, man. The goal is to put yourself in a really uncomfortable situation. That's number one, because just making the decision is difficult because it's scary. And then number two, having the fortitude to keep going and being resourceful enough to push. So I think, man, I'd say on a perfect clear day, even if you finished 112 miles, it wouldn't even have been even close to the accomplishment of going through this.
Yeah, and by the way, imagine going back on a clear day. Right. And if you got a clear view of sunshine, because one thing I think about too, when we talk about hard things and you see it on the internet, you see people do stuff, you reference Goggins and these different guys and gals that do these crazy things. It's like, why does that inspire us? Right. Like, why does that draw out an interest? And part of me thinks because there's this small part of us. It's like when you see a great athletic performance or a great performance in any kind, you're like, there's that small part of you that goes, man, I wish I could do that. Like there's this little part of me that thinks I can, but there's a bigger part that is telling me I can't. And so when you do that and you do hard things, you seem to get that satisfaction and that pride and that transferable perspective that you can bring back to all the different facets of your life. But then there's also this cool secondary consequence that you mentioned, leadership in your business, which I think is cool to expand upon, where you start going and I start looking at you and I go, man, do you see what Brooks did? Man, what can I do? Mm-hmm. Now that he did it, I wonder if I could do it. Mm-hmm. And so then you're really doing it for yourself, and you have all these questions that are unanswered that you're looking to process, but then that you get this really cool secondary consequence where people want to follow those people because they bring out the greater future self that they want to have, but they maybe haven't given themselves permission to go pursue what it is for them. So I'd love for you to speak, on the leadership side of that, because another part of it is like the business side. I think it's so ironic, and it's so, there's synchronicities sprinkled in the fact that you think day one's going to be the hardest, but then day two's harder. You think day two is going to be the hardest, but day three's harder.
What a beautiful transition. So the leadership side is like, that whole thing humbled me. I mean, it was humbling. It was like, you show up there and being able to share that with my team and with my people in my life and being able to share it here with the community. Right. Yeah. I could sit down and list everything that I did wrong. Right. I could sit down and say, I'm an amateur at best. Right. There's a lot of hard things that I can do all the time easier than most people. There's hikers that are probably going to listen to this that are like, oh, yeah, I've done that before. It's not that big of a deal.
Sure.
Right? Yeah, but I can ride my bicycle 150 miles at one time. Like I can get on my bike and go for a whole day on my bike, right? Some people can't manage to do 10 miles, right? I can, there's all these hard things that I can do in my life. Like this was supposed to be rough, right? I was supposed to get my butt kicked. I was supposed to have pain and suffering and whatever. I mean, if I was just trying to do something hard, I would have ridden my bike, right? I've been doing that for decades. I'm really good at that.
Comfortable hard.
Right? Yeah.
That's a comfortable, you know what to expect.
Yeah, exactly.
I think about an interesting contrast, and I'm curious to get your perspective on both. You set out to do something alone, which you could say makes it tougher. And I think, I think you've got 100 examples of that throughout the first couple of days. But then you meet Twister. In my mind, it wasn't any easier. You still had to do what you had to do.
Yeah.
But I think about the union. I think about the just having someone there to just talk to. Would you do it again alone, or would you do it again? Would you if you sought to do it again? Would you do it alone again, just better prepared, or would you do it again and have a teammate?
I haven't really thought about that, Rod. That's a great question. I feel like if I would have had. I feel like if someone had more experience than me, then, lack of a better term, if somebody's done it before and they're more comfortable and confident in it, and you're just playing second fiddle, you're just kind of going along and following their lead, like it's a different experience, right? So I was really looking for. I mean, Twister and I were texting earlier in the week and earlier today about some stuff as well, about doing some hikes here in Florida, right? But the big thing is like. The experience would be different. Like I went out there to be humbled. I went out there for it to kick my butt.
Unknown.
If I went back out there again to try to complete it, I would absolutely take somebody with me. I'd be a little bit more self-reliant. But I would say the overall arching goal was to do something hard and not be afraid to fail. Having somebody with me that had done it before would have prevented failure. right? And
that would have been more about getting the 112 miles to get the 112 miles, not about the experience.
That's a great point. Yeah, because I'm thinking to myself, I'd sign up for this all day long, but I don't know if I'm struggling personally to say,
let's go, Rod. I'm ready.
I'm in. But I look.
I'm not there.
Let's go, Rod. Let's go.
But I look at the idea of, I would love to do it with you. I would love it. I would love every bit of it.
Yep.
But I think to myself, would I be missing something of doing it by myself? And I don't know that I have that desire. I mean, because I think in my head, at least when I'm listening to you, and by the way, mad respect. This is
Rod.
just
Thank you.
This is beautiful. But I just say to myself, like, it's kind of like when we did the 4 miles every 48 or 4 miles every 4 hours, 48 hours. I mean, would I have done that by myself? I would it have been any easier? Would it have been any harder? I'm that's just what I'm struggling to hear with the story, because you're a badass for doing what you're doing. First of all,
to me, one of the most impressive parts about it.
That's what I mean,
love because I just think about, from anything. Anytime you do something hard, you gain strength. You were talking about laughing by yourself. Even the simple laughter of, oh my God, it's raining again, with another human being, where you can all laugh at it and lighten the mood. It cuts the seriousness and it gives you a lift. To not have that lift, you have to seemingly go to the depth of your soul, where this is not fun. This is not a team thing.
It's not cute. It's not cute anymore.
This is me against the wilderness and the trail and myself, and that is seemingly more what you were looking for.
That's essentially, that's what I was looking for. I'm bringing back that level of being humbled and being, and not getting as far as I wanted to go, and coming back and owning it. That was the leadership part. Coming back to these guys and then, hey man, how'd you do? How'd it go? Right? And then you talk about some of the adversity, but then the big thing you do as leaders is we cut out excuses. Like we've talked about how hey, I've got here and it was difficult and it was hard. So I've tried to explain that, but there's all the excuses in the world that we make, right, as leaders, not as leaders. There's all the excuses in the world that people make. A leader doesn't make excuses. You own it or you don't own it.
Say that a little louder.
You own it or you don't own it, right? Like that's it. A real leader.
But people say that all the time. But I own it.
I own it.
But do you think that's just words? That most of the time it's look, you either own it or you don't. Don't say you own it and then right. I feel that. I do that.
People that make excuses are not owning it. Like there's no,
That's right.
I could get you every excuse in the world about why I'm not an astronaut, right? I could tell you everything in the whole world about why I'm not a marathon runner. I could tell you everything in the world, but at the end of the day, they're just excuses. And, we've referenced Goggins quite a few times here. Like there's no excuses with that guy. He doesn't make excuses, right? And that's what he preaches. Stop making excuses. Get out there and do it. If you're going to fail hard, right? And that was a big takeaway for me. So to circle back to the leadership part, being able to show these guys, the ones that work for me and my team and the people that I communicate with or whatever, that, put yourself out there, do something that's out of your comfort zone, fight the good fight, do everything you got to do. And if you fail, you fail. You got to own it. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Man, this
that's so away, good, man. Well,
blows me away.
I tell you what, this is really cool. And if you're out there and you're thinking, man, I don't know, you might be like, Rod, like that sounds good, but I don't know about doing it myself, or whatever it is, just start. Just do something, man. You don't have to go into the wilderness for 6 days like this psycho man. But at the same time, like do something that's going to feel like that, and that's different for everybody. But I mean, ask yourself an honest question. Like, when's the last time you pushed yourself? When's the last time you got into the unknown? When's the last time that you thought, man, I need to close my eyes and say a prayer to get through this, because in this game of business, in this game of personal development, this game of self-actualization, the reason I love the alone thing, and I'll comment and end with this, is this game is very lonely.
It's uncomfortable. A
lot of times. You find yourself, whether you have now or you have in the past or you haven't yet, you will find yourself dark and deep, alone, and no one's coming to save you. And that's when you start to realize who you are. You start to get in touch with the deep fabric of your soul. And when you're around people, it's easy because it's distractive. You get the support, you get the comfort, you can feed off other people. But when you're, regardless of the situation that happens, whether you put yourself through tough situations or not, you are going to be there. If you sign up for growth, that is part of the process. I don't know why that's the way that it is. It's just the way that it is. You can fight it all you want, but if you want to be on the path of becoming more, there will come a time when you find yourself on a trail by yourself in the rain, broken toenails, and you have to dig down and figure out what is your next move. The panic is going to set in. The cortisol levels are going to spike, and you have to respond in a way that is empowering, that's going to get you to the next checkpoint. So your story is just a complete metaphor for this journey. And if you can put yourself in a situation where you can do these hard things, you end up learning about yourself, because it's like you're taking this 10, 20, 30-year journey that we're all on, and you're compressing it down to a day or a couple days or whatever it is that the event that you're going through. So And that is a gift that, no one will ever be able to take away from you. It will be in your coaching sessions with your team. It will be something that you're able to speak just like you are today and inspire others to do something for themselves. So, man, I know from the three of us, I have goosebumps, because I just have obviously I had so much respect for you anyway from our relationship for so long, but hearing this and now sharing it with the world, I just want to give you just massive props, man. And just,
thank you.
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
super
Thanks,
inspiring. So, but man, well, before we leave, I want to just shout out, give you an opportunity. If you're looking to connect with Brooks, please, a lot of this content, we'll put some of it in the community. Again, if you're looking to join the community, you can find it on all of our socials. You can scroll down on the podcast. It's on the link, or you can scroll down on the YouTube page and you'll see the link there. But man, really cool dialogue that'll ensue after this, and would love to maybe we'll do a Q&A from different people, and we can do like a follow-up series. It'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome. And then we talked about, having some discussions about when we have to eat humble pie.
There you
So
go.
I have a lot of those too. Like those very humbling, in some regard. It makes eating the rest of the humble pie a lot easier. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much. Brooks, thank you for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely amazing. Hey, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please share this. Somebody needs to hear this. Everybody needs to hear this. So until next time, guys, thank you so much, Brooks. Thanks, man.